3,000 years ago, the greatest war in history ended, and the man who won it began a journey far more dangerous, the journey home. It should have taken a few weeks. It would steal 20 years, every ship he had, and every man who followed him. This is the Odyssey. And hidden inside the world's oldest adventure is a lesson we still get wrong today. What is it? His name was Odysseus, king of a small rocky island called Ithaca. For 10 years, the Greeks had failed to break the walls of Troy. Spears failed, heroes failed. Then Odysseus had an idea. Not a weapon, but a trick. A giant wooden horse left at the gates. The Trojans dragged it inside as a prize. That night, Greek soldiers poured out of its belly, and Troy burned. Odysseus was not the strongest of the Greeks. He was the cleverest. His weapon was his mind. But the war was over now, and this cunning king wanted only one thing in the world: to go home. Home to his island, home to his wife, Penelope, home to a baby son he had left behind and never seen grow. But while Odysseus was lost at sea, his home was falling apart. On Ithaca, almost everyone believed the king was dead. Dozens of arrogant young men had moved into his palace, eating his food, drinking his wine, demanding his wife choose a new husband. They were the suitors, and they would not leave until Penelope surrendered, or until someone stopped them. Penelope held them off with a trick of her own, weaving a burial shroud by day and secretly unraveling it every night. And their son, Telemachus, now grown, watched strangers devour his father's kingdom, powerless to stop them. A wife under siege, a son without a father, a kingdom rotting. Everything depended on one man finding his way home. So let's go back to the beginning. The day Odysseus sailed from the ruins of Troy with 12 ships and a proud, victorious crew. Their first stop was a coastal city called Ismarus, and here Odysseus's men made their first mistake. Drunk on victory, they raided it, refused to leave, and feasted, until the enemy returned in force and cut them down. Odysseus lost 6 men from every ship. It was a warning he should have remembered. Greed and pride get people killed. Then the sea itself turned against them. A storm out of nowhere ripped the fleet off course for 9 days. They washed up on a strange, drowsy shore, the island of the lotus eaters. Whoever ate the lotus flower forgot everything: home, family, purpose. Odysseus's own men stopped caring whether they ever saw Ithaca again. He dragged them back to the ships by force, weeping, and chained them to the benches. The first trap was temptation. The next would be a monster. They landed next on a green, unguarded island and found a huge cave stacked with cheese, milk, and penned-up sheep. It was a giant's home. And curious, greedy for a guest gift, Odysseus insisted they wait inside for its owner. That owner was Polyphemus, a Cyclops, a one-eyed giant, and a son of Poseidon, god of the sea. He drove his flock inside and rolled a boulder across the entrance, a stone no human could ever move. Then he noticed the men. He asked who they were, and without waiting for an answer, snatched 2 of them and ate them alive. There was no escape. No weapon could hurt something that size. Kill him in his sleep, and they'd be sealed in that cave forever. So Odysseus did what only he could do. He stopped fighting and started thinking. He offered the giant strong, undiluted wine. Polyphemus loved it, drank cup after cup, and grew heavy and slow. Pleased, the giant asked the little man his name, and Odysseus smiled and said, "My name is Nobody." The giant laughed and passed out drunk. And that was the moment Odysseus had been waiting for. They sharpened a great wooden stake, heated its tip in the fire until it glowed, and drove it into the giant's single eye. Polyphemus woke screaming, blinded, and roared for the other giants on the island to come and help him. They called from outside, "Who is attacking you?" And the blinded giant screamed the truth. "Nobody. Nobody is hurting me." So the others shrugged and walked away. His clever lie had just saved every life in that cave. At dawn, the giant opened the cave to let his sheep out, and the men escaped, clinging to the wool beneath the animals. They ran for the ships and rowed for their lives. Odysseus had beaten a monster not with strength, but by becoming nobody. He was safe. He had won. He should have said nothing. But something rose up inside him that he could not control. Pride. He needed the giant to know exactly who had beaten him. So he turned and shouted back, "Tell them it was Odysseus, king of Ithaca." Now the giant knew his name. And Polyphemus lifted his hands to his father Poseidon and prayed a terrible prayer. "Let this man never reach home, or come late, broken and alone, having lost everyone." In one moment of ego, Odysseus cursed himself. At first, luck seemed to hold. They reached the floating island of Aeolus, keeper of the winds, who welcomed them warmly. As a parting gift, Aeolus trapped every dangerous wind inside a leather bag and handed it to Odysseus, leaving only the gentle west wind free. For 9 days they sailed. On the 10th, Ithaca appeared. Odysseus could actually see the smoke rising from home. Then, so close to home, he fell asleep. And his crew, sure he was hiding treasure, opened the bag. Every storm wind burst out at once and blew them all the way back to where they had started. So close, undone by mistrust. Battered and heartbroken, they drifted to a wooded island and the palace of a goddess named Circe. She welcomed a scouting party inside, fed them a warm feast, and with a wave of her wand, turned them all into pigs. One man escaped and ran back terrified. Odysseus set out alone to save his crew from the witch. On the way, the god Hermes stopped him, gave him a magic herb to break her spell, and told him how to face her. So when Circe tried her magic, it failed. Stunned, she realized who he was, and turned his men back into humans. Circe became an ally, and her island was so comfortable that they stayed, not for days, but for a full year. A whole year passed before his men had to remind him, "This is not home. Ithaca is still waiting." But before he could leave, Circe told him he must first sail to the very edge of the world and enter the land of the dead. At the ends of the earth, where the sun never shines, Odysseus performed the rites Circe taught him, and the dead came. First came the blind prophet Tiresias, carrying the one warning that would decide everything. But on one island graze the sacred cattle of the sun. Touch them, and you lose everything. Then Odysseus saw a ghost he never expected, his own mother, who had died of grief waiting for him. 3 times he tried to embrace her. 3 times his arms closed on empty air. You cannot hold the dead. He met the ghosts of old comrades, great heroes, now only shadows. Even mighty Achilles said, "Better a poor man's slave among the living than a king among the dead." Odysseus understood then how precious life is, and how much he wanted to live it, at home, with his family. He sailed back to the world of the living, carrying one clear warning: leave the cattle of the sun alone. The next danger was a sound. The Sirens, whose song was so beautiful that sailors steered onto the rocks to reach them, and drowned. No one who heard the song had ever survived, but Odysseus wanted to hear it and live. So he ordered his men to plug their ears with wax, so they would hear nothing at all. And he had himself tied to the mast. ordering them, no matter how hard he begged, never to release him. The song came. It was unbearable. He screamed and strained to go to them, but the ropes held, and they passed safely by. He heard the most dangerous song in the world, because he made it impossible to give in. Ahead lay a narrow strait guarded by two monsters, one on each side, and no way through without facing them. On one side, Charybdis, a whirlpool that swallowed the whole sea and any ship on it 3 times a day. On the other, Scylla, a 6-headed monster in a cliff cave that snatched sailors straight off the decks. Odysseus faced an impossible choice: lose the whole ship to the whirlpool, or lose a few men to the monster. He chose the monster. He steered from the whirlpool, and Scylla plucked 6 of his men, screaming, into the air. It was the worst moment of the voyage, sacrificing men he couldn't save to save the rest. Exhausted, they reached one last island, and Odysseus's heart sank, for grazing on it were golden cattle, the sacred cattle of the sun, the exact ones the prophet had warned him never to touch. He begged his crew to sail straight past, but they were starving and refused to go on without rest. They swore not to harm a single animal. So they camped, and then a storm trapped them there for a month. Their food ran out, and one day, while Odysseus slept, they broke their promise and slaughtered the sun god's cattle. Odysseus woke to the smell of roasting meat and knew they were doomed. The sun god demanded justice, and when they finally sailed, the gods sent a storm to answer for it. A single lightning bolt shattered the ship to splinters. Every man was thrown into the sea and drowned. Every man, except one. Odysseus alone survived. His crew's hunger destroyed them, just as his own pride once had. Alone now, with no ship and no men, Odysseus drifted for days until the waves washed him onto a distant island. It belonged to Calypso, a beautiful goddess who took him in, and then would not let him leave. She offered him paradise. She offered him her love. She even offered to make him immortal, to never age or die. All he had to do was forget Ithaca, forget Penelope, and stay with her forever. But every evening, Odysseus walked to the shore alone and wept, staring at the horizon toward home. He turned down immortality for the chance to grow old and die in his own home. 7 years passed before the gods set him free, but Poseidon spotted him at sea and shattered his little raft with one last storm. Odysseus swam for 2 days and nights. Half drowned and naked, he called ashore in the land of the Phaeacians, a kind, peaceful people. A princess named Nausicaa found him. There, at a feast, a blind bard sang the story of Troy, and Odysseus quietly wept, hearing his own life sung as legend. Moved by his story, the Phaeacians gave him a ship at last, and carried him home to Ithaca while he slept. After 20 years, Odysseus finally stood on the shore of Ithaca, but he did not run home in triumph. His home was still full of enemies, dozens of suitors ready to kill anyone who threatened their plan. So the goddess Athena disguised him as an old, ragged beggar. The king came home as no one at all. He went first to a loyal old servant, and then, secretly, revealed himself to his grown son, Telemachus. Together, in secret, they planned to take back the palace. A beggar and a boy against a small army. Disguised as a beggar, Odysseus walked into his own hall. The suitors mocked him, threw things, laughed at the old man. He said nothing. He endured all of it, watching, waiting, learning exactly who his enemies were. Only his old dog, Argos, recognized him. The faithful hound lifted his head, saw his master, and died content. Then Penelope announced a contest. She would marry whoever could string Odysseus's great bow and shoot through 12 axes. One by one, the strongest suitors tried. Not one could even bend the bow. Then the old beggar asked for a turn. They laughed at him, until the beggar lifted the bow, bent it with ease, and sent an arrow clean through all 12 axes. In that instant, the rags fell away. The suitors were staring at Odysseus, king of Ithaca, home at last. With his son beside him, he turned the bow on the men who had devoured his home, and took his palace back. At last, he stood before Penelope. But she had been fooled by liars for 20 years and would not believe it was truly him. So she tested him with a secret only her husband could know. And when he answered, she ran into his arms. So, what is the lesson? Odysseus was the cleverest man of his age. His mind won a war and outwitted a monster. But the one time his ego demanded to be seen, it cost him 10 years and every man who trusted him. His intelligence saved him. His pride nearly destroyed him. The lesson: know when to be nobody. Wanting the credit, the last word. It feels like strength. It's usually the most expensive mistake you'll make. Subscribe.